In 1942, young American men were asked to prove their love for a country that had already taken their homes, locked up their families, and called them dangerous. Before we enter this story, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because this is not just a war story. This is the story of men who had every reason to feel betrayed, but still chose to fight with a courage that became almost impossible to believe. Before the war, many of these families lived quiet lives. In Hawaii, boys helped their parents in small shops, on farms, near docks, and in busy towns where many languages mixed in the air. Suspicion turned into orders. In California, Oregon, and Washington, Japanese American families built lives from hard work. Parents planted fields, opened stores, raised children, paid taxes, went to church, went to school, and believed that the future would be better than the past. Many of their sons were born in the United States. They were called Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans. They grew up saluting the American flag. They played baseball. Some returned to families still trying to rebuild after incarceration. They listened to music on the radio. Some had sweethearts waiting for them. Some wanted college. Some wanted to marry, buy a house, and live a simple life. Then came December 7th, 1941. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The shock was huge. The fear was real. But in the days and months after the attack, fear turned into suspicion, and orders turned into one of the deepest wounds in American history. On February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. The order gave the military power to remove people from large areas on the West Coast. Soon, more than 110,000 people of Japanese ancestry were forced from their homes. Most were American citizens or long-time residents. Their clothes were wet. They lost farms, stores, furniture, family photos, and the safe feeling of being at home. They were sent to camps behind barbed wire in places like Manzanar, Hart Mountain, Tule Lake, Topaz, and Minidoka. The sons watched their parents stand in lines with tags on their coats. They saw mothers hold small bags because they could take only what they could carry. They saw fathers, once proud owners of land or shops, become silent men under guard towers. There were no trials for most of these families. There was no proof of crime. There was only the hard weight of fear. And then came the painful question: would these young men still fight for America? At first, many Japanese American men were not trusted enough to serve in combat. Some were marked as enemy aliens. Even when they had been born under the same flag, they were now asked to defend. But in Hawaii, where many people were of Japanese ancestry, things were different in some ways. After Pearl Harbor, many Nisei soldiers were already serving in the Hawaii National Guard. They were removed from their old units, but they did not stop wanting to serve. In 1942, many of them became part of the 100th Infantry Battalion. They trained at Camp McCoy in Wisconsin and later at Camp Shelby in Mississippi. They were far from the islands, far from home, and under the eyes of a country that still did not fully trust them. The 100th went to war first. In September 1943, they fought in Italy. Near Salerno, then through hard ground, rain, mud, and mountains, they proved they were not afraid. They fought so fiercely and suffered so many wounds that people began to call them the Purple Heart Battalion. That name was not a joke. It was pain. It meant blood, It meant empty bunks. It meant letters going home to mothers who already had too much sadness. While the 100th was fighting in Italy, another unit was being formed. On February 1st, 1943, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team was activated. Its motto was "Go for broke," a phrase from Hawaii gambling language. It meant risk everything, put everything on the line, hold nothing back. For these men, the motto was not just a slogan. The Allies had landed in Normandy on June 6, 1944. It was their life. Many volunteers came from Hawaii. Thousands came forward. Their medals shine because their road was dark. They wanted to show that loyalty was not about face, name, or blood. Loyalty was about action. Other volunteers came from the mainland camps, from behind barbed wire. Imagine that. A young man left a camp where his family was held by the United States government, put on a uniform of that same government, and went to fight for freedom in Europe. If this story moved you, leave a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories of courage, sacrifice, and history that should never be forgotten. His mother might still sleep in a small barrack. His father might still wonder if their old home was gone forever. His younger brothers and sisters might still walk past guards each day. Yet he trained, marched, learned weapons, and prepared to die under the American flag. This is the conflict at the heart of the 442nd. It was not only a fight against Nazi Germany, it was also a fight against doubt at home. Every step carried two battles. One battle was fought with rifles and grenades in Italy and France. The other was fought in the soul of America. At Camp Shelby, the men trained hard. There were tensions at first between Nisei from Hawaii and Nisei from the mainland. Their lives had been different. The Hawaii boys often came from a place where Japanese Americans were a large part of society. Go for broke. The mainland boys came from camps and from families that had lost almost everything. Some did not understand each other. Some argued. But over time they saw the same truth. They were all being judged. They were all being tested. They all carried family names that others had made heavy. The 442nd was not a large army. It was a combat team built around infantry, artillery, engineers, medics, and support troops. But history would remember it as if it were much bigger, because the cost of its service was so high. When the 442nd went overseas in 1944, it entered a war that had already eaten whole cities. Mortar exploded in the trees, and when shells burst above them, pieces of metal and wood came down like knives. Europe was in flames. The men knew that their chance to prove themselves would come in places where proof was paid for with lives. In June 1944, the 442nd joined the fight in Italy. The veteran 100th Infantry Battalion became part of the 442nd, though it kept its famous name because it had already earned deep respect. Together they moved into battle. Their first major actions showed the same pattern again and again. They attacked hard. They moved fast. They held under fire. They took hills, towns, and roads. They paid for small pieces of ground with terrible loss. But the true measure of the 442nd was not only in how many medals it would later receive. It was in what those medals represented. A medal can look small in a display case. It can shine under glass. But behind it there is a muddy field, a broken body, a friend who did not get up, a medic crawling through fire, a soldier moving forward when every part of him wants to stop. The men of the 442nd did not know they were becoming the most decorated unit in American military history for their size and length of service. They did not fight for that title. They fought because the man next to them needed them. They fought because their families were watching from far away. They fought because someone had to make the world see what had been hidden behind fear. And soon in the dark forests of France, the whole world would see it. By the fall of 1944, the war in Europe had changed, but it was not close to easy. Paris had been liberated in August. Many people hoped Germany would soon break. But the enemy was not finished. In eastern France, near the Vosges Mountains, the land itself became a weapon. The forests were thick. The hills were cold. Fog covered the trees. Rain turned the ground to mud. Yet the unit kept its spirit. German soldiers used the high ground, mines, machine guns, and artillery. Every road was dangerous. Every tree could hide death. The 442nd arrived in France after hard fighting in Italy. The men were tired, but there was little time to rest. In October 1944, they were ordered into the Vosges. Their job was to help break German lines and free French towns. One of those towns was Bruziers. The battle for Bruziers began in mid-October, and it was brutal. That does not make their service simple. The 442nd had to attack hills around the town before the town itself could be taken. These hills had names and numbers, but to the soldiers they became walls of fire. The men moved through forests where they could barely see. German guns fired from hidden places. The 442nd kept moving. They attacked Hill 555. They pushed toward other high points. They entered Bruziers and helped free it from German control. They were fighting because their code was simple. For the people of the town, these Japanese American soldiers were liberators. For the soldiers, it was one more proof that freedom had a price. But the 442nd was not allowed to breathe for long. Near Bifontaine, another hard fight waited. The men pushed forward again, and again the enemy resisted. They were exhausted. Their feet hurt. Their units had lost many men. Still, they were ordered to keep going. Reach the trapped Americans. In war, there are moments when the body has no more strength, but the order still comes. The 442nd knew this feeling well. Then came the crisis that would become one of the most famous moments in its history. In late October 1944, men from the 1st Battalion, 141st Infantry Regiment, part of the 36th Infantry Division from Texas, became trapped behind German lines. They were surrounded in the Vosges forest. They had little food, little water, and little hope. They became known as the Lost Battalion. More than 200 men were cut off. German troops controlled the ground around them. Other rescue attempts had failed. The trapped men were cold, hungry, and under constant danger. The 442nd was ordered to rescue them. This order came after the 442nd had already been fighting for days. The men had taken heavy losses at Bruziers and Bifontaine. At dawn they struck. Many were near collapse. But the order was clear. Move into the forest. Break the German ring. Here the story becomes almost unbearable. Japanese American soldiers, whose own families were held in camps by the United States, were now being asked to save other American soldiers trapped by the Germans. The country that had doubted them now needed them. The men did not stop to debate the unfairness. They moved. From October 26th to October 30th, 1944, the 442nd fought through the Vosges to reach the lost battalion. The forest was steep and dark. Their families stood in their place. German soldiers had machine guns on the hills. The 442nd attacked again and again. They climbed slopes under fire. They crossed open spaces where bullets cut the air. They crawled, ran, fell, rose, and pushed forward. The fighting was so close that sometimes men could see the enemy only yards away. The cost was terrible. Companies that had entered the battle with many men were reduced to small groups. Officers were wounded or killed. Medics worked in mud and blood. Some soldiers carried wounded friends while shells fell around them. Others kept firing even when they were injured. Each step forward seemed to take another life. But the 442nd kept going. There is a moment in the story where the facts feel larger than words. The men of the 442nd were not fighting for a hill that looked grand on a map. They were fighting through wet trees to reach strangers. They were fighting because Americans were trapped and needed help. Do the job. Protect the man beside you. On October 30th, 1944, the 442nd reached the lost battalion. The trapped Texans were saved. More than 200 men came out alive because the 442nd had refused to stop. But the rescue left deep scars. The 442nd suffered hundreds of casualties during the operation. The exact numbers are often told in different ways, but the truth is clear. The rescue cost far more than anyone should have asked from men who were already exhausted. This was the climax of the 442nd story, but it was also the revelation that changed everything. The men who had been treated as suspect were now seen by many as heroes. The soldiers who had families behind barbed wire had broken through German lines to save fellow Americans. The men called enemy by fear had answered with loyalty written in blood. But even then, full respect did not come at once. Some medals were given, some praise was spoken, but when the surviving men came home, many did not return to open arms. But many honors were delayed for decades. America had seen their courage, but America still needed time to face the full truth of what it had done to them. After the Vosges, the 442nd continued to fight. They returned to Italy and took part in the attack on the Gothic Line in April 1945. The Gothic Line was a strong German defense in northern Italy. For months it had blocked Allied movement. The 442nd helped break it with a surprise attack through steep mountain ground. They climbed at night where the enemy thought no large force could pass. Once again they proved that they could do what others thought impossible. The 522nd Field Artillery Battalion, part of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, also moved across Europe. In the spring of 1945, as Nazi Germany was falling, soldiers of the 522nd helped free prisoners from a Dachau death march near Waukesha, Germany. These prisoners were starving, weak, and close to death. Some had been forced to walk by the Nazis as the camps were emptied. The Nisei soldiers gave food, care, and help. Men whose own families had been locked away in America now found. People who had suffered under a far darker system of hate in Europe. In that moment, the meaning of freedom became painfully real. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. The 442nd had fought in Italy, France, and Germany. It had helped free towns, rescue trapped soldiers, break enemy lines, and save prisoners. Homes were gone. Farms were lost. Businesses had vanished. The legal battle of their lives was not over. The uniform had proved their loyalty, but it could not give back every stolen year. Still, something had changed forever. The 442nd had created a record no one could erase. After the war, the story of the 442nd became a wound and a medal at the same time. The medal showed honor. The wound showed the cost. Together they told the truth. About 14,000 men served in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, overtime. The unit became known as the most decorated unit in United States military history for its size and length of service. Its soldiers earned thousands of awards, including Purple Hearts, Bronze Stars, Silver Stars, Distinguished Service Crosses, Presidential Unit Citations, and 21 Medals of Honor. The numbers are powerful, but numbers can also hide the human story. Each award came from one moment when fear was strong and a man still moved forward. The Purple Hearts tell one kind of story. They tell of bodies hit by bullets, shells, mines, and fire. They tell of hospitals, missing limbs, and men who came home changed. The Bronze Stars and Silver Stars tell another kind of story. They tell of courage under fire, of soldiers who saved friends, held lines, led attacks, and refused to leave the wounded. The Presidential Unit Citations tell the story of the whole unit, not as one hero, but as many men acting together under extreme danger. The Medals of Honor tell the hardest story of all. For many years after World War II, only one Japanese American soldier from this group, Sadame Minamori, received the Medal of Honor for his wartime action. He died on April 5, 1945, near Seravezza, Italy. During battle, he gave his life to save others when he threw himself on a grenade. His medal was awarded after his death. His story was heroic, but he was not the only one whose courage reached that level. Decades later, the United States reviewed the records of Asian American soldiers from World War II. Many awards were upgraded. On June 21, 2000, President Bill Clinton presented Medals of Honor to Japanese American veterans and families in a White House ceremony. Many of the men were from the 442nd and the 100th. Some were alive to receive the medal. Many were not. This moment did not erase the past, but it revealed something important. The nation was finally admitting that some heroes had not been fully seen when they should have been. One of those men was Daniel Inouye. On April 21, 1945, in Italy, he led an attack against German positions even after being badly wounded. He lost his right arm. He survived the war and later became a United States Senator from Hawaii. His life showed the long road from suspicion to service, from battlefield pain to public leadership. But his story was only one among many. The 442nd was not great because of one famous name. It was great because ordinary men, many from poor families and wounded communities, did extraordinary things together. The deeper question is why the 442nd is still remembered with such force. Many units fought bravely in World War II. Many soldiers gave everything. So why does this unit still stand apart? The answer begins with the impossible position these men were placed in. They fought for a country that had failed their families. It makes it more powerful. They did not fight because America was perfect. They fought because they believed America still had a promise worth saving. Their courage did not hide the injustice. It exposed it. Every hill they took made the barbed wire at home look more shameful. Every friend they saved made the word enemy sound more false. Every medal they earned became a silent argument against the fear that had locked up their families. The 442nd also stands apart because its service was so intense. In a short time it was thrown into some of the hardest fighting in Europe. Italy, southern France, the Vosges Mountains, the rescue of the lost battalion, the Gothic line. These were not easy places. These were places where units were broken, rebuilt, and broken again. The 442nd had to replace its men again and again because casualties were so heavy. Go for broke was not just about attack. It was about identity. It meant that they would not live halfway. They would not serve halfway. They would not let others define the size of their loyalty. If the country doubted them, they would answer not with speeches, but with action. If the enemy blocked the road, they would climb the hill. If friends were trapped, they would go into the forest. If history tried to forget them, their record would speak. There is also a family story inside the military story. When a soldier from the 442nd wrote home, he might be writing to a camp address. When a mother received news of a son wounded or killed, she might read that news inside a barrack built by the country her son had died defending. This is the pain that makes the 442nd story so emotional. It is not only about battle. It is about love under pressure. It is about parents who endured shame and fear, sons who carried that shame into combat, and families who had to rebuild after both war and injustice. The legal and moral conflict did not end in 1945. Years later, America began to face the truth more openly. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which formally apologized for the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II and provided reparations to surviving victims. That apology came more than 4 decades after the camps. For many families, it came too late for parents and grandparents who had already died. But it mattered. It put into law what the 442nd had shown in blood. The mass incarceration had been wrong. This is why the legacy of the 442nd is not just military history. It is American history. It asks a hard question. What does loyalty mean when trust is broken? The men of the 442nd answered in a way that still feels almost impossible. They did not deny the betrayal. They carried it. They did not stop being hurt. They moved with the hurt. They turned pain into service and service into a record that still stands in memory. Today, the 100th Battalion, 442nd Infantry Regiment, continues in the United States Army Reserve. The old segregated wartime unit is gone, but the name remains. The story is taught in museums, classrooms, memorials, and military ceremonies. In France, towns like Bruyères remember the Nisei soldiers who helped free them. In Hawaii and across the mainland, families remember fathers, grandfathers, uncles, and brothers who wore the uniform while their own people were under suspicion. The 442nd is still honored because its story has a rare kind of power. It is brave, but it is not clean. It is patriotic, but it is not blind. It is full of medals, but also full of grief. It shows that a country can make a terrible mistake and still produce citizens who call it to a higher truth. It shows that courage can come from people who have been pushed aside. It shows that honor is not given by prejudice. Honor is proved by action. The shocking truth is that the most decorated unit in American military history, for its size and length of service, was built from men many Americans did not trust. That is the revelation at the center of this story. The men behind the wire became the men at the front. The sons of families under guard became rescuers in the forest. The soldiers asked to prove their loyalty became the proof that loyalty had never been missing. And when we ask why the 442nd Infantry Regiment is still remembered, the answer is simple enough for every heart to understand. They fought 2 wars at once. One war was against the enemy overseas. The other was against fear, shame, and injustice at home. They won the first with weapons. They won the second with courage so strong that history could not bury it. Their name lives because their sacrifice was real, and their story still speaks because it reminds every generation that the true measure of a nation is not only how it treats heroes after victory, but how it treats them before the world knows they are heroes.